Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Power and Policy, a podcast by the Canadian Muslim Public Affairs Council. I'm your host, Ginella Massa, and today we're bringing you a special episode on a breaking news story about newly obtained government documents. Earlier this week, a coalition of grassroots Palestinian advocacy organizations released a landmark report revealing that despite the Canadian government's declared arms embargo, military exports to Israel have been continuing for the last 2 years. Now, in response to that report, Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand issued a public statement dismissing some of the findings of that report as flawed. She continued to deny that military components that could be used in Gaza have been transferred to Israel since January 2024. But today we're going to be speaking about a newly emerged document. It's a parliamentary report that appears to confirm that Canada not only continued to export weapons to Israel throughout 2024, but also approved new arms permits following that January 8th embargo announcement in 24. Now, this government report was obtained by Mohamad Fakih. He's a prominent community leader and a Canadian Muslim entrepreneur. It's been analyzed here by CMPAC's legal and policy advisors. Mr. Fakih joins us here in studio alongside Khaled Qazzaz, the executive director at the Canadian Muslim Public Affairs Council, who's been tracking this issue. And a little bit later, we'll be joined by a few other guests to further discuss. So first, I want to take our viewers through what this parliamentary report appears to show. So number one is a table on page 5. It's a 10-page report. It's a table on page 5 with the headline, Number of Export Permits Issued and Used for Exports of Canadian Military Goods and Technologies to Israel from 2016 to 2024. Now, what's important to understand is that when permits are approved, and it says so here, they're valid for a maximum 5-year period, and they can be used to export during any of the years when that permit is valid. So even if a permit was not issued in 2024, in 2024, a permit can be used by any permit that was issued in the 5 years prior. So if you scroll down now to 2024, first of all, we see that there were 2 new permits issued. And again, I'll remind you of that headline that this is military goods and technologies to Israel. 2 new permits issued in 2024 and 164 used in 2024. Now, we've heard from the government trying to backpedal by saying, well, these are non-lethal, these are for training, or using other reasons why these permits might be approved. But if we go forward to page 8, we actually see some of the figures attached to what was sent in 2024. And if we see here, 2.4 is bombs, torpedoes, rockets, missiles, other explosive devices and charges, and related accessories, components, and equipment. $2.3 million worth in 2024, not to mention a number of other components, including aircraft components, unmanned airborne vehicles. I believe that it's talking about drones, and a number of other weapons in the millions. So let's bring in first Mohamad Fakih. You obtained this report. You brought it to CMPAC. Tell us a little bit about, how this report is different from other ones that we've seen talking about this so-called arms embargo.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And a member of parliament that I will not disclose his name handed it to me physically. And it says clearly on it that this is a report from the Library of Parliament. And I'm sure a lot of the people will not understand how accurate this report should be, because if the Library of Parliament having a report within its inventory or documentation, it's for sure based on government data. And unfortunately, what we're about to share here could be arranged between a scandal, deception, reverse in policy, but most importantly, it's breaking and violation of the international law and the criminal law in Canada. It's illegal. And what we're talking about here is a government that continuously, including last tweet that you mentioned, they confirmed to Canadians, and they criticized the previous report about the Canadian government still shipping arms to Israel despite the embargo. And this report shows clearly in 2024, after January 24, there was 2 new permits issued and 164 old permit used. And I think the government once again owes to Canadian the truth, the honest answers to this, but most importantly, they should be held accountable, especially Minister Anita Anand, because the type of weapon that we're seeing on this specific report, and let me be clear, this report was prepared for the Liberal. So every single Liberal MP has received this report, and yet, despite knowing that they're shipping weapons, they decide to lie to Canadians and say that they have not shipped any weapons, and specifically what the report mentioned is the type of weapon were shipped, and those weapons were specifically denied by Minister Anand, and that shows that Minister Anand was not honest with when she actually spoke, and that the report that was prepared by other organization wasn't accurate nor precise.
Let's bring in one of our other guests who are joining us virtually. Federal NDP MP Heather McPherson joins us. I want to get your reaction from a political perspective. We mentioned, this is a parliamentary report. Can you help us understand the context of where this report comes from? Who would have access to it? The type, its accuracy, its validity, and why it was even done in the first place?
Yeah, so this is a report that's been prepared by the Library of Parliament. Now these are public servants. They're completely nonpartisan. They provide factual support for members of Parliament so that we can do our job. And so somebody has asked the library to provide this information. This information was apparently provided to the entire Liberal caucus, but it would be provided based on facts. It would be provided based on available information by looking at the Global Affairs Canada website, looking at reports that were provided to the Foreign Affairs Committee. All of that information would be very, very factually compiled and then provided to whoever asked for this report to be drafted.
Let me bring in another guest here to weigh in on this. Rachel Small is with the Canada lead for the World Beyond War and part of the Arms Embargo Coalition. We mentioned that report off the top that was out earlier this week, really a bombshell report that started this conversation this week and has brought the conversation into the mainstream and has forced the Canadian government to answer some questions. When you see this government report, how does this kind of jive with what you've found and what really stands out to you as what people should really be paying attention to?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is Canadian government data that substantiates and backs up a lot of what was documented in our report, which largely showed the shipment of goods. So while we were looking at the literal movement of these weapons via commercial shipping data and also via what the Israeli government reported having received, here we're seeing from the Canadian government their own perspective on the permits they issued and the ones they know were used. I mean, frankly, this report, it's completely shocking. It really proves that Minister Anand, that all the Liberal MPs knew Canada was exporting arms to Israel when they claimed otherwise. I mean, Minister Anand lied. It's as simple as that. And not only do we know that she lied, what this report shows is that she knew that she was lying when she was lying. I mean, frankly, it's just time for Canada to stop lying. It's time for Canada to do what it says it's been doing, which is actually stop the flow of these weapons to Israel that are so clearly documented in this leaked report.
Rachel, I want you to be really specific when you say Minister Anand is lying, because often when she's questioned, the devil's in the details, right? We'll get these responses that will really rely on sort of the technicalities, the loopholes, the semantics, the language to make it so that what she's saying is technically true, though maybe not what people may have understood. When you say she's lying, what specifically are you saying?
I mean, just yesterday, in response to our report that we released a couple days earlier, Anand posted a statement to Twitter. I mean, on Friday afternoon of an August long weekend, so I'm not sure how many people she wanted to see this statement, but nonetheless, she released a public statement, and in it she said, "We will not allow Canadian-made weapons to fuel this conflict in any way," end quote. I mean, to me, this is pure propaganda. This is not a matter of what you are talking about allowing in the future. The Canadian government is currently allowing Canadian-made weapons to fly directly to Israel, and these are components of weapons that are being used in Israel's main weapons of war. We're talking about Canadian parts, for example, of F-35 fighter jets. This is the primary bomber plane that Israel is using to drop 2,000-pound bombs on Gaza. There's no question about these Canadian parts being used in the weapons that Israel is using in Gaza right now. And I mean, what it shows is that when the Canadian government spoke endlessly and continues to speak endlessly of this pause on new permit approvals, that was pure propaganda. They knew full well that maybe they were pausing approving any new permits, but they had rushed through a record-breaking number of permits in October, November, December 2023. They knew full well that those hundreds of permits would continue to be used to ensure that Israeli weapons manufacturers never lost access to Canadian military goods while they could get up at a stage and say, "Oh, we've paused all weapons permits." It's not honest if you talk about a pause and you conveniently omit the fact that there's hundreds of permits still active being used every day to ship these weapons.
Right. I mean, to me, it feels like a lot of lie by omission of what they're saying and then what they're choosing not to say. And let's be clear, this report does show 2 permits approved in 2024. I mean, I suppose there are 7 days in 2024 because the embargo started on January 8th, where conceivably that may possibly have happened. But regardless, this report does seem to verify a lot of and underscore a lot of your already in-depth research that relied on publicly available commercial shipping documents and tax documents. Let me bring it back here into the studio with Khaled Qazzaz with the Canadian Muslim Public Affairs Council. Obviously, you're wanting to have this conversation in the public. This is something that you've been talking about for some time. Talk to us about your reaction to this report and what you see as complicity, I think.
Yes, thank you, Ginella, for bringing this conversation. And it's quite important to answer the big question here is basically away from all the details is what is Canada's role with what legal scholars internationally and locally have called genocide? What does Canada play here? And report after report now, and this is an internal parliamentary report that confirms that there is one means or another that of supporting Israel's weapon of destruction and aggression on Palestine and specifically in Gaza, and that's really the role. There is a deep moral question, as Mohamad referred to. Members of parliament who know that this is happening within their government, what did they do to stop this? And the moral question that Canada has to answer and the Canadian government has answered to is basically, you have a moral obligation to stand against the genocide. And if we take it to the legal obligation, Canada has an international obligation under the International Convention for against the genocide, or the Genocide Convention, basically not only not to participate, but also to prevent the genocide. So it is not to leave us as civil society and communities to go after loophole after loophole after semantics games to actually get into the meat of the substance, and that's basically to what did Canada do to prevent the genocide, not only be complicit. So we here see traces of complicity The Canadian government has to come out very clear about and very transparent about what's there, and it is enough of this chasing some details that they have to come and basically be clear about it, admit the wrongs, and move towards ending that complicity in the genocide.
And let's just talk a little bit more about that, because as you say, their response has been one of sort of evasiveness, technicalities. You know, they're trying to get off on a technicality and absolve themselves by using these little wordplay loopholes, etc. You know, and especially one of the things I keep hearing is lethal versus non-lethal. It's for training. Can you just speak to that as well? Let's say, you know, it is non-lethal. When we're talking about non-lethal, we are still talking about arming a military with tools to assist in their what many have called a genocide. Can you just talk a little bit about that and you know, them needing or having the ability to be a leader as opposed to kind of hiding behind these semantics?
Yes. So as I referred to, our legal obligation as a Canadian government, according to the Genocide Convention, is to prevent. Okay. So being part of even training capacity, support, logistic support, being part in trade support, even supporting the Israeli military in any shape or form is basically supporting the ongoing operations. Political support is taken into consideration. Logistic support, training support, supply of weaponry, all of this is considered supporting a government and a military that is active. Is even if it's a plausible genocide, it is still a responsibility of the Canadian government to stop and to prevent. And if you go to the numbers, you talk about 18 million in weaponry was exported to Israel. How much of this is goes to training or goes to actual killing people of the ground? The mere fact that there is doubt that it could be used is enough for a reason for the Canadian government to stop. And similarly, whether it's drones in another line or the 12.5 million in spacecraft electronic equipment and 2.3 million in bombs, rockets, and missiles.
That's right.
So I don't know how can you interpret this differently either.
Yeah, if we can, Raf, see that page 8 chart again, because this is what I want to point out. They keep trying to make this distinction between lethal and non-lethal. First of all, the permits don't classify them that way. They classify all of these together, I suppose, for a reason. And as you point out, right, we're talking about surveillance and warning equipment. We're talking about ground vehicle and components. We're talking about naval equipment, aircrafts, unmanned airborne vehicles, and all of it is specifically designed or modified for military use. Electronic equipment, and in the millions, these amounts, 2.9 million on those aircrafts. Let me come back to Mohamad Fakih here, because you were a long time Liberal supporter. On election night, we sat here and talked specifically about Anita, Anand. And I think you kind of foresaw that if we, you give her too much, you give a finger and you get to take the whole arm, in the sense of, running with this. What's your feeling now? You've been very vocal and critical of the previous and current government. What do you think should happen now?
Well, the Liberals are playing games, and they're trying every single thing in their toolbox. Instead of preventing the genocide and preventing to violate international law, they're trying to use nuances, argue with Canadian, lethal, not lethal. Like, listen, this is a report, clear. Library of the Parliament have a report. It says that they actually issued 2 permits. And they used another 164, and is specifically specifying amounts of money spent on lethal weapons sent to Israel to fuel a genocide. They're going through the impossible to help Israel kill children. And they're lying to Canadian, and they're breaking international law and the Canadian law. Anita Anand, if she has anything left in her, she should at least resign. Melanie Joly should resign. Thank God Justin Trudeau resigned. He should have resigned too if he was the Prime Minister. And if Mark Carney does not do the right thing with these 2 ministers, right? Knowing, and all of us knowing that he knew about it, yet he allowed the lies of yesterday's tweet of Anita and Anand, because these are not a tweet that comes out from someone that used to be involved in the Liberal. Somebody in PMO has approved that tweet, that explanation. Everybody in Anita and Anand's office approved that tweet denying the reports that many hardworking pro-Palestinian and other organizations worked on it. The least she should apologize to Canadian and resign. And the same thing for Melanie Joly. And that has to happen immediately. Canadians are tired for 18 months that we all have to spend our real money, organizations' money, to actually prove that our government, that running our taxpayers' money, lying to us, and we spend our money to show that. It's shameful what's happening. In any other country, they would have resigned already, but yet they keep denying, lying, and going in circles. All this to help Israel killing our children. And that should not be acceptable. Anita and Anand should resign immediately, and so Melanie Joly.
Let me bring in Heather McPherson. On the political stage, what are our obligations, and what would you like to see? What can we do?
Oh, I mean, I'm listening to this interview, and it is just so shocking to me that this is where we are at. This is the stage that we are at as a country. We have obligations under international law. We have obligations under Canadian law. We know, there was a motion that came forward. It was a New Democratic motion that came forward to the House in March of 2024, where the government stood, where Melanie Joly stood in the House of Commons, Justin Trudeau stood in the House of Commons, Anita and Anand stood in the House of Commons, and voted for this motion to stop sending weapons to Israel. We have to acknowledge that there is a genocide happening right now, that people are being starved to death, that children are being starved to death, and the Canadian government, the Liberal government, is allowing arms to be used against those children at the same time that they are misleading Canadians, the same time that they are telling Canadians, no, don't worry, that's not happening, but it is happening. And as a member of Parliament, I've been listening to people from coast to coast who have been so appalled by our government's lack of moral capacity, the ability of our government to do the right thing. One of my worries, frankly, is that the step that the government took to potentially recognize the state of Palestine in September will be for this government, will be the final thing. They'll say, well, we're done. We've done the jobs that we need to do, when there's so much more that needs to be done, that we need an arms embargo, that we need sanctions in place, that we need to ensure that humanitarian aid is getting to people that are starving to death right now. All of these pieces are urgent. And I have no faith that the Liberals will do the right thing when we have seen them mislead Canadians time and time again about this arms embargo.
As we mentioned, this parliamentary report would have gone to the entire Liberal caucus. What's your message to them? I mean, obviously, you're in an opposing party, but is there a point too where you reach across the aisle and say, do the right thing within your party?
Yeah.
You have the power to.
Canada has a history of in the past we have had the moral backbone to stand up and do what's right. We were leaders in developing the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice. We were leaders in the apartheid in South Africa. We need to be leaders again. Canadians expect our government to be leaders again, to believe in human rights, to believe in international law, to believe in our own laws of our own country. That's what I'm expecting from this government. I'm not going to pretend that I have a lot of faith in them, but this is what Canadians expect from their government.
Rachel, really quickly, given the reaction to your report with this coalition, how have you felt about how the government has responded to all of this, given the public outcry, the shock, and the outrage?
I mean, it's really disappointing. I mean, frankly, Minister Anand seems more interested in lying to the Canadian public than protecting Palestinian children. And as you mentioned, this is not her office. I mean, these statements would have been approved by the PMO. So really, this this government seems more committed to spin than to stopping war crimes. I mean, every day Palestinians are being killed with Canadian weapons. That makes all of these ministers complicit. That makes this government complicit. And I mean, the lies have to stop. And if Minister Anand truly doesn't know how to stop these exports, we're very happy to walk her through it publicly. But the government needs to stop hiding behind these Twitter statements, and they have to start facing the truth. Canada is arming a genocide, and the solution is very simple. We need a full arms embargo. It's defined on the Global Affairs Canada website what an embargo is. They know how to do it. That's what we need, an arms embargo right now on Israel.
I want to let Khaled have the last word, but Mohamad, you look like you had something to say there.
Yes,
you
I
wanted
do
to
actually.
jump in.
What keep bothering me that the Prime Minister himself, Mark Carney, when he was asked in an election rally, he was saying, "Do you know there is a genocide in Gaza?" And his answer said, with a smirk on his face, because everybody knows that he's very smart, that's why we have arm embargo. Well, I have a message to our Prime Minister. Canadian decided today with the polling data that they prefer that he actually recognize the state of Palestine over more tariffs from Trump. What that message said to him, he could be the smartest prime minister, but Canadians are not going to trade him saving them some of the tariffs and a little bit more money in their bank account for them being a complicit in a genocide. The prime minister of this country today, knows, and he knew it at the time, that he was still, and the government and the liberal were still sending weapons to Israel, and they were fueling a genocide and helping killing the children of Palestine, when he actually said that, and that's why we have an arm embargo. I don't know, maybe people say I push too far, but what else? How can I trust any one of them, including the Prime Minister, on any other file when they're ready to lie to Canadian about killing a human being and helping to violate international law and the Canadian law? So I think they need to reassess. I said it before and I'll say it again. I am liberal. This crew and the crew before, they have lost their way, and they do not deserve to lead us if they want to lead us with deception and lies. And they need to course correct immediately. And Canadian, in the polling that was showing, it sent a great message that we are maybe capitalist, but we prefer kinder capitalism. And that's what we need to think about. Canada needs to do kinder politics around the world, and people are ready to pay for it. Canadian taxpayers that pays the Prime Minister's salary and Anita Anand's salary has said, we're ready to pay more, but don't be complicit in the genocide and recognize the state of Palestine.
Khaled, as an advocacy group, what's your message to people who are watching, who are feeling angry, who are feeling helpless, who are feeling like they've spent the last 2 years trying to engage the government and it feels like it's fallen on deaf ears? What's your message and what do we do?
So I have two messages really, one to the government and one to the Canadian people in general. And with regards to the government, I want basically them to realize that everything is not really a political equation based on interest. We wake every day to the news that children and even adults are dying of starvation. You see pictures that are horrific. And it's not a natural cause or a natural disaster. It is intentional. It is based on a political decision that the international community can stop. The international community, if the political will exists, can force the hand of the Israeli government to let food in. And food cannot, and starvation cannot be used as a weapon in a war. So Canadian government has an obligation not just to explain their positions, but has an international obligation, a moral obligation to basically stand against this starvation campaign, this genocide that is taking place. And that's the original positionality. And what can they do about it is not to send gestures that we will continue to send you some stuff, whether it's training or others, because there is an active killing that is happening in place. They have to send the exact opposite. What we should be seeing of the government is more condemnation of this kind of action, more diplomatic measures to show that this is not acceptable, and more action, basically, whether it's sanctions, whether it's arms embargo, to send a clear political signal that this is not something that the Canadians are accepting, and that Canadian government is basically in line with international law and with Canadian law. So this is what's expected from the government. And what's expected from the Canadian people is to continue to take this government to account, is to continue to hold them accountable, and to expect nothing but transparency. Governments can make mistakes, but they should own up to these mistakes. The Prime Minister or the Minister of Foreign Affairs made a mistake or made a wrong assessment or a wrong statement. They should come back and correct it. They should apologize to the Canadian people, be more transparent, and commit to more action that ends the genocide and end the genocide now.
We'll leave the conversation there. I want to thank my guests in studio, Mohamad Fakih, for bringing the report to light, the Canadian Muslim Public Affairs Council, Khaled Qazzaz, and joining us virtually today, Rachel Small with World Beyond War, and Heather McPherson, NDP MP. Obviously, an important conversation that we hope will be continued to have had in the mainstream. And thank you all for your work and bringing this important conversation to light. And thank you at home for watching. This has been the Power and Policy Podcast, brought to you by the Canadian Muslim Public Affairs Council. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, stay informed, stay active, and speak up. Assalamu alaikum. Take care.